The Oklahoma Sooners are heading for a big bounce back season in 2025.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks again for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Tune in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. We're joined today with a very special guest, Bob Sturm of 96.7 and 1310 The Ticket in Dallas, Fort Worth. He's been covering college football, NFL football, hockey, all the things that you love to watch for 30, 40 years at this point. I've been a big fan of Bob's since I was a teenager, listening to him in The Ticket when I grew up in Dallas, Fort Worth. So this is a thrill for me, Bob. Thank you so much for joining us here on Locked On Sooners.
It is my pleasure. I love popping on. So let's do it.
This is going to be great. So we're going to talk some general SEC stuff here in a little bit.
Okay.
But I want to get your feelings on the Oklahoma Sooners as they head into 2025. What do you make of this team? Do you think that they're heading towards a bounce back?
Well, it's an incredibly interesting situation. Oklahoma obviously has been top of mind and top of the page for as long as I've lived here, it seems like. And so for them to go through any sort of spell of adversity is kind of weird, a little bit different. And there's no doubt that when they do drop a level, people are constantly on watch that they surely shall bounce right back. They're Oklahoma. They always do. And so, that sort of colors my perception of almost San Antonio Spurs, like that if they have a bad season or two, don't get comfortable with this because it's not going to be like this for very long. There's just too many people obsessed with fixing any issues that are there. And that's why you can rest easy, because it's a priority to them to be great at football and frankly, a birthright to many of them. And so do I expect a bounce back from Oklahoma? Of course, you always should. And these points that they have emphasized, obviously quarterback and OC, it looks like the entire country agrees that they've done a really nice job of doing as good as you can do to try to fix a historically ridiculous offense from last year and to try to make it good enough to compete with one of the toughest schedules in the country. So we are really trying to thread a needle here by doing all of that in 1 year and one turnaround, especially given the schedule is a bear. But it's going to be wildly entertaining to find out. And John Mateer is a stud, and Ben Arbuckle is highly, highly coveted. And you have a coach on the hot seat, and you have a great defense, and all these types of things. And so, the Sooners will remain one of the top items of intrigue as we enter this college football season, as usual.
Yeah, and a lot of it does start with Brent Venables and his defense, because that was the bright spot from last year when you had an offense that was so historically bad. Oklahoma's defense actually kept them in some games they probably had no business being in. So you added John Mateer, you add Ben Arbuckle to the offense, and I think everybody's hoping it returns to a 2016, 2017, 2018 Oklahoma offense, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that for Oklahoma to have a lot of success this year.
No, it doesn't. But it also doesn't have necessarily the path that you would have available back then. And I don't want to undersell the Big 12 because that conference has been very enjoyable through the years, and I obviously respect it greatly. But I do think when you start to look at, just the path and the lack of forgiveness that a down Saturday, even not a down, but let's say a not dominant defensive performance against certain opponents can be deadly. And if everything besides win and loss are just style points that fill airwaves until the next game, then we have to understand the reality of different paths have different requirements. And so again, to talk about what the pressure on Venables to produce a high quality season against the schedule they have and the things they're dealing with as a program as they try to sort of make plane repairs while in the air, just all these things. It's a real workload that should be challenging, because you look at the possible outcomes and the possible scenarios of the season, and you're like, okay, what scenario can get Venables the extension, or maybe not the contract extension, but just an extension, the stay of execution, if you will, the maintaining the job, and keep Arbuckle, which means the offense went great and we want to keep him, but he's not someone else's head coach next year. Just all these scenarios that are in play to try to say, okay, start of business 2026, when the schedule should be more normalized in this conference, and the path, where will Oklahoma be 6 months from now or 12 months from now? I think that's probably the most interesting question that I ponder entering this season.
I think it's fair for a lot of people to have that question, because when everything went so poorly last year, it seemed like Oklahoma just couldn't find an answer offensively. Venables made kind of a comfortable hire in Seth Luttrell, the Oklahoma alum. It just didn't pan out. Not all his fault. You can't lose as many offensive linemen and wide receivers as you lost and it be all on the offensive coordinator. Sometimes you just can't scheme around everything that you're losing. But for Brent Venables to remain comfortable in his coaching chair, what do you think Oklahoma has to do this year for the fan base to be satisfied, for the boosters to be satisfied, for the program itself to feel comfortable with the direction?
Well, I guess build to a point where people can squint and see a contender in 26. And because I just think contending in 25 is probably a bridge too far. Now you get out of the gate and you take care of Michigan, and then you head to the Texas game just feeling great about yourself, which of course assumes many things, but including health and including a fulfilling trip to Temple and all these things. But we assume a few things here for the sake of conversation. I think there is a path to, even in October, feeling optimistic about the direction of the program again. Things change so quickly in this sport, and honestly, one or two Saturdays can go right or go wrong. And you guys felt that last year, like the South Carolina game, and you're like, oh my gosh, what is happening here? Or the Alabama game, and it's like, well, maybe if I squint, is there something here? And so these are the twists and turns, but obviously what separates the men from the boys in college football is the ability to turn out the consistency that we normally expect from Oklahoma. And that starts with not having a historically ridiculous offense. And that's probably starts with having the same offensive line and the same wide receivers for more than 2 straight weeks. And so, some of it is snake bit. Some of it is, do we have the right guy running our program? I certainly don't want to be a pessimist, but I do have enough experience in the sport to know that some guys are just great coordinators and not necessarily, program builders. And we can't water down the legacy of like Bob Stoops by saying there's a Bob Stoops on every corner. They're rare, right? And so if they're rare, sometimes it requires a few bites of the apple to find the right guy. And the biggest prerequisite for that guy might not be ties to Bob Stoops, but rather this is a guy that we think actually has the global view to run a program and all that goes with it in today's modern college football, not design a really good defense. And so I will admit, I am not sure I'm a big Venables believer as a program builder and as a difference maker. And maybe he's more of Tom Herman than he is, Sark. And I'm sure everybody loves Texas comps, but these are the, hey, A&M, who I follow very closely with Jimbo and with Kevin Sumlin and and trying to figure out, is Elko, a good DC, or is he a good head coach and program builder? And these things take time, and they take a lot of failure. So it's a convoluted answer to a complex question. And I guess what I would say is, it does seem like there's some real pivot points on the schedule. The first one is a very beatable Michigan team, but also a very good test. I mean, it's Michigan. And from there, then you look at some of those road games where, if this was a Baker Mayfield Oklahoma team, you would say, yeah, we'll go to Tennessee, and yeah, we'll go to South Carolina. But now you're like, okay, can these guys handle what will be Saturday night tests at tricky road places? Yeah, I will tell you, Saturday night in Columbia, South Carolina is tougher than it looks. And I would just say that can bite some teams. And road games in the SEC are not as easy as you think when the schedule comes out. And you're like, yeah, okay, we can go win this game in Nashville. What could be so hard about that? And we saw last year it was pretty hard for some really good teams. So it's college football. It's incremental progress, but it's really proof of concept of the Brent Venables era. And that's what I believe is on the line in 2025 for Oklahoma, is they have to prove the concept that it's not Dylan Gabriel reliant or even John Mateer reliant, but that we can take the circumstances of each season and build a contender, because that's what we here in Oklahoma believe we are capable of based on decades of proof.
Yeah, Oklahoma's offensive lineman Gabe Eichard, Oklahoma legend, he says the expectations are the expectations.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what happens year over year. It's Oklahoma.
Right.
The expectation is to go compete for championships. And Venables will say the same thing. And he's not satisfied at all with just being a fringe contender or a bowl, participant.
Right.
He wants this program contending. We're going to get into some SEC expectations. Is Bob buying the Texas hype? We'll discuss coming up next year on Locked On Sooners. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week one even kicks off, this is your moment. Looking to take a flyer on an MVP race? Listen, I'm loving Dak Prescott at plus 4,000. Is that a long shot to win the MVP? 100%. But if things go right for Dallas and they do make the playoffs, despite maybe not being one of the more talked about teams in the NFL, Dak could very well work himself into the MVP race. So visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. And we're joined here on Locked On Sooners by the great Bob Sturm, the Sturminator. You know him from 1310 The Ticket, 96.7 FM as well in Dallas-Fort Worth. Bob, I think a lot of people don't realize that, yes, Dallas is a professional sports town. The Dallas Cowboys run everything, but there are so many college football influences there because of Texas Tech and Baylor and TCU and SMU and Texas A&M and Texas, all having these large fan bases in the Metroplex. But I want to ask you, what has been the vibe like since Oklahoma and Texas joined the SEC in the DFW area? Because I don't necessarily get to be a P1 every single day and listen to The Ticket every day, but has there been a different kind of college football buzz since Oklahoma and Texas joined the SEC?
Yeah. However, it's a little difficult to pin down, because we did have this universe, and we were quite stable in this universe for a long time. I know stable and college football don't go together very often, but it felt like we knew the Southwest Conference Big 12 pecking order, and the interest levels were all sort of tied together. And for a while, even in the last decade, A&M was sort of off on its own path, but Texas and Oklahoma and where they were sitting, obviously Oklahoma usually year over year was sitting higher, and then Texas was getting to a point where, man, they can't beat TCU now, or they, Baylor is giving them trouble. So it was a really weird last half decade or full decade for the Longhorns in the Big 12, and that allowed this vacuum where Art Briles pops up and Gary Patterson pops up, and obviously Mike Leach before them at Texas Tech, but all these mini eras of 5 and 10 years of these powers shifting in the Big 12 was a very interesting thing for a neutral like me to sort of sit back and kind of see who's going to grab our attention year over year. And the whole time SMU is changing conferences every 2 months, and they're, slowly but surely building something, but mostly being ignored by most of us. So now, as we sit here in 2024, SMU's in the playoffs, and Texas is in the playoffs again, and Oklahoma's going through some trouble, and A&M is running in place, and Baylor is trying to find a post Briles identity, and TCU's trying to do the same thing post Patterson, and there's upheaval. And now with the 3 big schools going to the SEC, I will tell you, my attention has been drawn to that conference very, very fervently. I wish I had 2 minds on Saturday, but I don't. And so I can either follow what I think is the best conference in college football by a mile, or I can try to fragment for the whole audience and have a much lesser grasp of this Game of Thrones in the SEC. So I probably have chosen follow the 3 programs that I think all have massive fan bases in this city: Texas, Oklahoma, and Texas A&M, and that's cost me some of my knowledge or feeling for how good Baylor actually is, or how good TCU is, or Texas Tech, or all these Big 12 schools. And then now you got SMU in the ACC, and how are you supposed to learn another conference there? But SMU puts out a great product, and so they're a lot of fun. So, John, that's a long way of saying it's complete chaos right now. I do follow the SEC with great interest and great time consumption, that at least the NFL spillover that I'm allowed, and the Big 12 and the ACC. To me, it's more, I catch it here and there. I know enough to be dangerous, but I don't feel like I know as much as I need to know, and I wish I could. But I actually get to know a lot of that in the spring when I'm studying draft prospects, and I'm more capable of having good conversations about those schools probably in March, when nobody wants to have those conversations.
Yeah, except for Dallas Cowboys fans who just
Sure.
are fervently into the NFL drafts from basically before the NFL season even starts. They're already talking.
That's right.
The 2026 NFL draft. A couple more things before we get you out of here, Bob. Again,
Sure.
thanks so much. And again, go listen to Bob from 3 to 7 with Corby Davidson, an Oklahoma fan. I'm sure he's got a lot of thoughts and opinions on OU right now. From 3 to 7 on 1310 The Ticket and 96.7 FM in Dallas Fort Worth. So buying the Texas hype, buying the Arch hype going into the season?
Well, probably not as to the level as Texas people are, but yeah, I mean, I can't imagine a guy who's really never played meaningful football being the Heisman odds-on leader entering the season, but that's where we are. Like, he is legitimately in Vegas, the favorite to win the Heisman, and yet we've never really seen him pass even the most basic test of a college football quarterback. So that's crazy. That is a crazy level of hype and expectation that is certainly enough to make you think that Texas has a large variance of outcomes this year. It's just true. And then they play at Ohio State in the very first game of the season. And then they play at Georgia. And then, of course, they have Oklahoma. They play at the Swamp in Florida. They go to Kentucky, I want to say. And they also have Texas A&M at home. So they have 4 or 5 games that could trip them. But at the same time, when I see like a 9.5 total for Texas, I'm probably going over. They're incredibly talented, and you want to talk about a team that's proved the concept. Sark, it looks like they are not struggling by moving to a new conference and by just rolling another recruiting class on. They put 12 dudes in the NFL. Certain schools are used to that. Texas was not, and they lose all of that. Their darn near entire offensive line except right guard. Their entire offense really except right guard and wide receiver with the Wingo and one running back. They lost everything else, and yet they're voted preseason number 1. And it seems believable. So Texas is really, really freaking good. There's a number of reasons for that, but we've seen enough. What we haven't seen, and for all the people that, fell for the headline in The Athletic a couple weeks ago of is Texas the new Alabama? That's comedic until they prove the important final step. And here it is. Nick Saban against top 5 teams at Alabama. Top 5 going into the game, AP top 5. That's a very, 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 very high bar. But Nick Saban was 24-11. He won 70% of his games against other top 5 teams. And that was whether Alabama was in the top 5 or not. We're just talking about their opponent was. So Alabama could have been ranked 20. Now, they weren't very often. But the point is, this is based on your opponent's pregame rank of the game, 24-11. And I believe, let me make sure I have my numbers right as I do this on the fly, John. I don't want to give anyone the false impression that my did do my research, because that's a big thing for radio guys, is that Sark against top 5 teams at Texas is 1-5, which actually might remind Oklahoma fans of Lincoln Riley's record against top 5 teams. And so we can't just say, hey, you recruit, hey, you're ranked high, hey, you look good in your sideline clothes, and hey, everyone is saying nice things about you, therefore you're Saban. No, you're not. There's only 2 guys that are even in that area code in this era in terms of that many wins and that high a win percentage, who are even close, and you're looking at Urban Meyer, especially if you combine Florida and Ohio State, and Kirby Smart. Then there are a couple others who have double-digit wins over top 5 teams, but they're slightly under 500, and that's Bob Stoops and Dabo Swinney. And so when you start talking about the bar is this coach has at least 5 wins over top 5 teams at his stop, it does bring in guys like Ryan Day and Mac Brown and Jim Harbaugh, but in each of those cases, they're about break even or they're below, but at least a national title.
Yeah.
So we need to keep the bars very high, and Texas has attained a very high bar, but not the final level. They still have to beat the final boss. And if their last 4 losses are Georgia, Ohio State, and maybe Saturday, Ohio State, that is a wonderful thing to be able to say, but you now have to start beating those heavyweights to be considered anybody's Alabama. So let's not water down what being Alabama is. We know what it is. It means you take the heavyweights and you beat the snot out of them too. And so we know it when we see it. We know Texas has done everything but that, but they still have to do that. And they can start on Saturday. So they'll have some real chances this year, probably at least 3 or 4 heavyweight fights. And if they win 3 of them, they'll win the national title probably. So it's all in front of them. They're very good. They're probably the best team in the SEC, pound for pound, but they still got to do it at the highest of highest levels. But let's be honest, they're in a spot where a lot of schools would love to be. So I guess there's ammunition for Texas fans and there's ammunition for Texas haters to say, yeah, but not yet. And for Texas fans to say, yeah, but we have a 5-foot putt every year. And at some point we're going to make this 5-foot putt. And then what are you going to say then? So that's kind of the conversation right now.
Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. You can even read real customer reviews on their site. It's helping a lot of people feel more confident and present in the moment. So head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege and use promo code LockedOnCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety and effectiveness or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information.
We have a 5-foot putt every year, and at some point we're going to make this 5-foot putt. And then what are you going to say then? So that's kind of the conversation right now.
Yeah, and not everything, again, speaking of the John Mateer, versus Oklahoma's defense, Arch, and Texas's defense, it doesn't all have to be on him. And Sark has done a good job of coaching to his quarterback strength, to his team's strength. It's a matter of now just getting over that last hurdle and going and winning. So, hey, we wake up on a Tuesday in January. Who's the national champion?
Gosh, that's a great one, man. And I don't know that I've fully made this pick. So maybe I'll just throw something against the wall here and see if it sticks. But gosh, that's a really good one. That surely I should be prepared to answer that question.
Stumped the Sturminator.
Yeah, you might have here. I don't have any idea. When I look at the SEC, I see 3 teams that are on that top tier, but I can't separate them right now. I think Texas is probably the best team in the conference, so I should probably say that puts them as the inside track to win the whole thing. But it feels insane for me to say that a new quarterback and an entirely new offense can go win the Natty. That feels crazy. And yet, if I'm not going to take them, who do you take? And so, man, gosh, can I have Texas or the field? You
can do what you want. You're Bob Sturm. No, I think what this represents
like a cop-out,
is that this might be one of the most wide open seasons of college football that we've seen in quite some time.
That's right. And I don't, boy, I know a lot of people are going to throw out, I guess the Penn State, Ohio State team that emerges. I guess the veteran quarterback at Penn State is appealing to some, but I just can't fall in love with that. And so it's wide open, John. And I hate to hedge like this, but I feel weird saying Texas, but they do feel like the team I keep swinging back to here. So maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. Golly, what's going on here?
I mean, I think it's everybody. I mean, they were voted the SEC preseason #1, the AP #1, the coaches #1. You're not alone out there thinking that Texas could go win the Natty. It's just a matter of, can they go coast to coast? Can they start the season as the #1 team, finish the season as the #1 team? That's just a really, really tall task. For me, right now, I've been leaning Georgia only because of Kirby Smart. If there's a coach out there that gets the benefit of the doubt, the consistency that Kirby Smart has had at Georgia gives me the most confidence. But even then, I'm not super confident in Georgia as a team because quarterback turnover, haven't really been able to run the ball like they want to run the ball. So I think there's just so many teams that you could poke holes in going into the year. Now we wake up in November and we probably have a better, understanding of who the favorites are. But right now it's just so hard to say.
I just wish I could buy that Georgia has an explosive offense again, because they really haven't post Stetson Bennett. And I need to know that that's a factory too. Like, you've proven you have a defensive factory at Georgia and you have a talent factory. There's no doubt. but where are the explosive plays on a routine enough level that I don't even care who the players are? It's Georgia. They're going to find, you
Right.
know, 5 explosive plays every single game, no matter what. I mean, watching Georgia try to find explosive plays post George Pickens and those guys, you know, it's been a bit of a slug. And Lad McConkey and that best crew, I suppose, that 2023 season. So it wasn't that long ago, but 2024 was rough, and so just moving forward, I'm still not quite there with Georgia, but I think there are probably 8 teams that can win the national title, and all 8 have a really good argument against them. So I guess that makes it for a fun season, or at least an incredible playoff. So
Yeah.
here we
And
go.
a very
Right?
chaotic season. We'll probably have several moments where the number 1 team gets upset.
Yeah.
And then somebody cycles back to number 1. It's just going to be a really, really competitive year. We only plan to do 15 minutes here, but Bob gave us 30. That's just how great of a guy he is. Make sure you go listen to Bob 3 to 7 Monday through Friday on 96.7 FM, 1310 AM, The Ticket in Dallas, best sports talk station of all time. Like I lived in California, got to listen to the Mighty 690 and Jim Rome, and my dad and I were like, oh man, we're just not going to get the same kind of sports talk, and it's just not going to be the same. We arrived in Dallas in 1997, hit the ticket, and never turned it off. We turned it on and left it on.
My man.
As the ticket saying goes. But again, go check him out. Follow him on social media at Sports Sturm. Bob, thanks so much for doing this and being a part of the show.
Let's do it again.
All right, we will. And that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Sooners. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. But until next time, for Bob Sturm, I'm John Williams. Talk to you next time. Boomer Sooner.